Hello.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
I'm great.
Good to hear. I am so excited. I'm gonna ask you 73 questions. Are you ready to get started?
I'm so ready.
Okay, first, can you tell us, who are you?
Sure. I'm Becky 𝐋𝐄𝐓'𝐒 of Norwich, Vermont. I'm a former Dartmouth admissions director, and I'm the author of Valedictorians at the Gate, which is a book about college admissions.
Very cool. I cannot wait to dig into that book. So what are you passionate about, Becky?
I'm passionate about handwritten letter writing and helping students navigate the college admissions process with sanity.
Okay, what's your most impressive achievement?
Definitely writing this book while I had 2 infants at home.
Oh, how old are they?
Now they are 3 and almost 5.
Hi, babies.
Yes.
Where did you go for your undergrad?
Colby College in Waterville, Maine.
Okay, and what did you major in?
English.
Okay, where did you go for grad school?
I went to Dartmouth.
Oh, makes sense. And what did you major in at Dartmouth?
It was called MALS, the Masters of Arts and Liberal Studies, with a concentration in creative writing.
Oh, okay. So which experience was better, grad school or undergrad?
I really liked undergrad.
Me too. Have you had any other jobs besides being an admissions officer?
Yes, in high school I was the mayor's secretary.
Oh, how was that?
It was interesting. There was something different every day.
I can only imagine. So when did you know you wanted to be an admissions officer?
When I was in college, I loved giving tours, and I'd even give tours to families on Saturday mornings, which is when I knew I loved it.
Yeah, definitely. So why did you decide to be an admissions officer at Dartmouth?
So I always loved the school, and I actually applied in 1997, and I didn't get in, but I knew a lot about the college. I knew a lot of people that went here, and so I thought it would be a great fit.
Now that you've learned how to choose students, why don't you think you got in when you applied before?
I think my application looked like many others.
Got it. So are you happy you chose to work here at Dartmouth?
Very much so. I worked there. I'm a former admissions director, but I worked there for 13 years before leaving a couple years ago.
Wow. So where are we right now?
So this is 𝐋𝐄𝐓'𝐒 Pond. It's part of campus, and it's a beautiful little walk for Dartmouth students.
Can we go on that little walk?
Let's go.
Yes. So what's a typical day like when you were an admissions officer?
Yeah, you know, there are really 4 seasons to the admissions cycle, and in the fall we would recruit students. In the winter we would just read applications like crazy. In the spring, we would have yield events where we'd invite students to campus and try to convince them to come to our school. And then in the summer, we'd do a lot of planning and statistics to get ready for the next year.
Wow, lots and lots of stuff. So which part was your favorite?
I really like the travel.
What states did you recruit from?
So I was the director of international, and so I traveled the world everywhere from, Brazil to Singapore. But domestically, my 2 regular states were New Jersey and Florida.
Okay. Which country was your favorite to visit?
Oh gosh, Swaziland was awesome.
I need to go. So during what time of year did you start reviewing applications?
So we would start reviewing early decision applications in mid-November when we'd return home from travel. And then for regular decision, we'd start reviewing applications January 1st, New Year's Day.
Okay. How many applications did you read a day?
So I typically read somewhere between 130 to 160 per week.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was a lot.
Yes, that is a ton. Was it typically online or printed off?
So when I first started, they were all paper, and then they quickly transitioned and it was a completely online system.
Which one did you prefer?
Online.
Okay. Did you read applications anywhere besides the office?
I read them at home fairly often.
Okay, so how many hours did you work during the recruiting season?
Too many.
I can only imagine. Do admissions officers having bad days actually influence applicants' results sometimes?
I think like anyone, I think everyone has a bad day every once in a while. But what was nice about working in admissions is applications were reviewed by more than one person. So there was always kind of a safety umbrella to make sure that we were giving every student the benefit of the doubt.
I see. What's the most unique encounter you've had as an admissions officer?
I would say, the travel was amazing. I got to see public schools, private schools, international schools, parochial schools. I literally traveled the world seeing every type of school there was, and that was incredible.
Wow. So why'd you stop?
I had a baby.
Oh.
And then I had another one 22 months later, so I couldn't do the travel.
Makes sense. So how does Dartmouth differ from the other Ivies?
Yeah, I think all of the Ivies are different. And I think that Dartmouth certainly has something going for it called the D plan, which is a 4-quarter system that really helps students get internships at different times of the year than other students.
Very cool. So I know Dartmouth isn't usually ranked as the top Ivy, so can you quickly give me an elevator pitch explaining why it deserves more recognition?
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, I hate rankings because I think that students should go to places that make sense for them. But I do think, Dartmouth certainly has an incredible campus, an incredible community, and as I said before, that Dartmouth plan really helps students kind of get jobs.
What is a common trait accepted Dartmouth students have?
When I worked in the office, I think all students, had intellectual curiosity. They wanted to be able to go to a place like Dartmouth where their brains were going to be challenged.
Looking at the application process as a whole, how can one make their applications stand out and impress an admissions officer?
I think everyone is trying to impress admissions officers, and I think in my book I talk a lot about taking back control of the process and stop trying to figure out a perfect algorithm to get in and instead figure out how to more authentically present what you're already doing, right, to a college campus, and then hopefully you'll find a good fit. So I really encourage students to, when they think about the application, think about what they're doing already and how to present that to a college admissions committee rather than obsessing over checking boxes.
That is good advice. So does the criteria or what you guys are looking for change each year when you worked as an admissions officer?
Yeah, when I worked there, institutional priorities are always changing and different colleges have different priorities, so things would change, certainly.
What's the best essay topic you've ever heard?
Oh gosh. Well, for confidentiality reasons, I can never talk about any real applications, but I will say on the whole, I think there's so much pressure for students to write the great American college essay, and yet from experience, there is no such thing. Instead, there are many good college essays. And so I tell students to take the pressure off. There's no essay, frankly, that I ever read that was the sole reason a student got admitted. It was more of just kind of hearing a student's voice with the holistic whole. So I tell students, good essay topics are anything that's incredibly personal that tells a story. And I feel like there is nothing too silly, there's nothing too trite, and just, take the pressure off yourself a little bit and just figure out what you really want the admissions committee to know that's not already in your application.
I see. What's the worst essay topic you've heard?
I think, essays that really weren't helpful were essays that students talked about how much they loved or admired another person. And so we read a lot of why I love my grandma essays, but frankly, we wanted to admit grandma at the end of them.
Not good. So how much does the GPA matter?
Yeah, so GPAs mean nothing to me because every school has a different scale, right? Some are on a 4-point scale, some are on a 5-point scale, some are weighted, some are unweighted. And so when a student would tell me his or her GPA, the question I would follow up with is, what classes are you taking? What kind of grades are you getting within those classes? What kind of school are you going to? And so I tell students, don't obsess over the number, but think more about that holistic transcript, the curriculum, and frankly, how you're prepared to go to college. College isn't easy, and high school is an important stepping stone.
Yes, and I definitely agree. College is not easy. What's the #1 reason a student might get rejected?
For not being thorough enough in the application. I tell students that I often felt like a lawyer when I worked as an admissions officer because I would be presented a case, right, your application. And I wanted as much evidence as possible from a particular student so that I could make my case to the admissions committee for why a student was stronger or frankly weaker in an admissions pool. And so I tell students, be thorough, everything counts, and don't leave a question blank.
Got you. Can you tell when a student is lying?
I think, what was funny for me is what would drive me crazy was when a personal statement was perfectly edited, brilliant prose, and then we'd get to a supplemental or short answer that were 2 sloppy sentences. And so I think that was just a tip off. This student clearly got a little bit too much help in the application. And then oftentimes if we were questioning the authenticity of an application, we would look for confirming evidence from recommendations from either the counselor or the teachers.
Got it. So you mentioned that Dartmouth does have supplements. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, so and again, I don't work there anymore, but they change every year. But we used to require something called the peer recommendation. And some colleges and universities ask for, letters from a family member. Some ask for the popular, like, why Duke? Why do I want to go to this school? And the advice I give to students is that supplements matter. And oftentimes you can show your demonstrated interest. You can share something that's not being asked in the application. And I think one of the big mistakes students make is they spend so much time on the essay and they don't spend that time on the supplements. And as much as they don't want to hear that they should do more work, supplements really matter.
So what's the toughest admissions decision you've ever had to make?
I think there were some tough ones when students who had everything else going in their application didn't seem to care about the application. Like maybe they didn't show up to an alumni interview for no good reason and we didn't know why. Maybe they didn't, fill out one of the supplemental questions. And so we'd always question, like, do you really want to be here if you're not willing to show up at an interview? So those were kind of a little bit hard.
Yeah, okay. So do admissions officers check social media?
That's one of the number one questions we receive. The answer for me when I worked there was that we didn't have time. When you're reading 160 applications, you're trying to get through them. However, occasionally we might check, particularly if we wanted to confirm something in your application, or sometimes, to be honest, I would Google like what an acronym was of a club listed on a resume, and maybe I'd find out that you weren't treasurer, that you were just a member, right? So I think people need to clean up their social media for many reasons, but often just because it's a good thing to do if you want a job. And it's a new world out there right now with social media.
Yes, we have to be careful what we post for everyone watching right now.
Yeah, just for the good of you, not for college admissions. Just be a professional.
Yes. Is there a standardized test score threshold that students have to pass?
No.
Okay. What's the lowest test score you've ever accepted?
Yeah, I don't know. But I would say, it's funny. People love talking about testing. And in my experience, students who didn't have strong test scores but had really strong academic transcripts and recommendations, we'd be thrilled to take. We didn't worry about that so much. Vice versa, however, and I warn this to students, particularly looking at highly selective schools, if you get that pretty little SAT score and then your transcript's not so great or your recommendations just say, it comes easily, that's not that great either.
Yeah, so essays are really important. So how long would you suggest that a student should work on their essay for?
I would say, give it time, start early, and just be thoughtful about your topic.
Okay, how many people would you suggest a student has read their essay over?
I think it's great to ask for help, and my kind of threshold for how much help is too much help is I think you should ask someone who would provide about the same amount of guidance they would on a paper for high school, meaning that if you handed in an English paper to your English teacher and they put some notes on the side, I think that's good advice that you could get from a parent, an English teacher, a mentor. But if you're getting, too much written advice or people are writing the essays for you,
Not much. Makes sense. Does Dartmouth have any unique traditions that you like?
Oh, sure. They, actually, since we're by Ockham Pond, there's something called the polar bear plunge in the winter where they put a hole in the pond and jump in. So that was always fun when I worked there.
And it's safe?
Ish, yeah.
How big a factor is not taking AP classes?
Oh, schools sometimes don't offer AP classes. So what we do is we look at the curriculum offered at any particular school when I worked there, and we would just say, hey, are you doing the best you can with what's offered to you?
I see. So if I got a 1 on my AP exam, should I panic?
No, don't panic. I would say ask your counselor if it makes sense to send it in, and ask the schools if they actually require sending it in, because frankly, at a lot of these schools, you don't have to send in scores if you don't want to.
Oh, I didn't know that. Does going to a private school help your application?
Oh, that was another great question we would get is where should I go to school to have the best chances of getting in? And the bottom line is we took students from all different types of schools as long as they were making the most of the opportunities available to them. And so at highly resourced schools, you better be making the most of those opportunities. And at schools with very few resources, you better be taking those resources and running with them.
I see. So are specific schools considered feeder schools?
No, there are certain schools that certainly send a number of students every year, but I don't think that, colleges and universities are setting out for feeder schools. I think it's just the way it happens.
Yes, okay. So early decision versus regular, is there actually an advantage?
Yes, typically, but I would suggest that you ask that question for whatever school that you're looking to apply to.
Okay. In terms of extracurriculars, is it better to be a well-rounded student or a pointy student with very specific skills?
That's a great question too. And what I would tell students is when we reviewed resumes, we were looking to see that you were doing something and you cared about something. And I think I wrote a New York Times op-ed about this particular topic about box checking. I think it's bad to check boxes if you're worried about doing things just for the sake of getting in. I think you need to find your authentic interests and then find a way to communicate them in the application to the audience.
Okay. How important are letters of recommendation?
They're really important because they help confirm kind of the intangible qualities that might be mentioned in the application, but we get better kind of evidence and stories about who you are as a person.
I see. So can you tell if a letter of rec is heartfelt or generic?
Letters of recommendations take a lot of time for teachers and counselors, and I think we can tell when teachers or counselors, are very enthusiastic about a student. So those are the ones that tend to stand out the most.
Got it. So what part of the application would you say weighs the heaviest?
I think we need to make sure that students at whatever college can do the work. However, most students can. And so from there, it's really, literally every piece matters for the holistic kind of view of who that applicant is and what they can bring to the college campus.
Okay. Is there anything surprising about the way you review applications?
Yeah, for me, I went to a big public high school in New Jersey, and there's something called the high school profile, which is a document that every high school mails in with the transcript. And I didn't know that existed. And yet it's an integral part of the academic review because an admissions officer will look at your transcript and say, okay, what was available to you? And so my advice to students who are a little bit worried about maybe there are resources for college counseling, get a copy of your high school profile, read through it, and if there's something you think is relevant, don't be afraid to write a letter to the admissions committee and say, hey, my school doesn't tell you that we have to take 4 years of gym, and therefore my senior year, gym happened at the same time as French 4, and that's why I didn't have a language. And I think, again, back to like the evidence and being a lawyer, the more information and the more you can advocate for yourself within those pages, the better off you're gonna be.
I see. So if you were ever unsure about an application, can you cross-check with other admissions officers?
Yeah, we were colleagues and there was a ton of training that needed to be done before we kind of knew what we were doing. So yeah, the admissions colleagues are very friendly.
Got it. Does playing a sport increase your chances of getting in?
I don't think there's any particular extracurricular that you do that's going to increase your chances. The recruited athlete piece certainly is its own track. But I think for us, again, we just wanted to make sure you were doing something. And so do what you love and, again, communicate it to us.
Does being a legacy help you get in?
It depends on the college. Some colleges and universities, care a lot about legacy and will give you an extra review.
Okay. Does being a minority increase your chances?
Again, colleges are looking to diversify their profile, and I think depending on what they're looking for, they're certainly going to act affirmatively for, the admissions review, but they're also going to keep an eye on the class whole and figure out, the holistic review and who's best for the class.
As an admissions officer, what are the most frequently asked questions?
Yeah, so the number one question I would get is it better to get a B in an AP class or an A in like a next level down honors class? And I was sympathetic to that question, but the truth is there's no good answer because the bottom line is you should be taking a curriculum that is appropriate for you. And if you're drowning in too many APs, that's not a good thing. But yet if you're floating by in an unweighted, ranked school with easy classes, it's not going to prepare you for the rigors of a college classroom.
I see. That makes sense. So what questions are undervalued but extremely important that students should be asking?
I think students should be caring about the fit of the college. I think that they should be asking questions about where college, frankly, is hoping to expand their campus. Some schools are investing in the arts, some are investing in sciences. And I think, whatever schools you're looking at, to be open-minded and, pay attention to what they're investing in, because I think that's going to tell you what experiences you might have.
I see. So any tips for international students?
Yeah, I think, again, being thorough. As someone who traveled the world recruiting internationally, so many different countries have different school systems, and so don't assume the admissions office knows anything about your, Swiss school. Instead, really explain, what's available and why.
Okay. What's a likely letter?
A likely letter is a letter that comes earlier than a regular notification letter that basically just says that you're likely to be admitted. It's used often with athletes.
Do admissions officers communicate with other admissions officers at different schools?
No, it's highly unethical, and it's a line we don't cross.
How do
We used to not cross.
Got
I don't work
it.
there anymore.
How do you feel when all the decision letters go out?
When we used to mail out decision letters, there would be a lot of donuts, there'd be a lot of candy, and we'd be exhausted because it's a lot of work. But
I can imagine.
it was a relief.
Oh, how many emails do you receive from students after the results are out?
I got a lot of emails, mostly from waitlisted students trying to figure out how to best, their chances of getting in off the waitlist.
Any advice for that?
Yes, be a squeaky wheel. And it's the only time I would say that. But I do think, and again, when I was at St. Lawrence, when I was at Dartmouth, we're looking for students who we know are still going to come. And so if you're waitlisted, I would say write a letter to the admissions committee and say, hey, I'm Domonique. I am, Bowdoin is still my #1 choice. And here's what I've been up to.
I see. Are there certain students that you really wanted to get into Dartmouth that you checked to see if they got in?
Yeah, I wrote a whole chapter in my book about the most memorable, impressive student I ever met while recruiting. And the truth is she never even applied to Dartmouth. And so the point of that is, admissions officers are human. They care about decency and character building. And it's not all about achieving an Ivy. It's about being a good person who's preparing for your intellectual journey. And so there were many, many that got away that impressed me incredibly.
Very cool. So how can one improve their transfer app?
Keep your grades up at whatever college you're at.
Okay. I've always wondered, what is the best way to address an admissions officer from email?
Sure, I think you just say, Dear Michael, whatever their first name is. I think that's totally appropriate.
Okay. For students who have been homeschooled recently from the pandemic, any advice?
Yeah, I think quickly, watch this YouTube channel, watch Dom's YouTube channel.
Yes, watch.
I think if you can't tour a campus, read the on-campus newspaper, because you can get a lot of information from current op-eds and current events. And I would also say, really consider maybe some freshman or sophomore year teacher recommendations if you were able to have kind of a more in-person relationship with those people, considering that a lot of the virtual relationships were a little bit different.
Do you think you've admitted a future millionaire?
Absolutely.
So why do you think Dartmouth chose you as an admissions officer?
I hope it's because I just, I write in the book, I applied to Dartmouth in 1997 and I didn't get in. And I went to my 5th choice school, which was 𝐋𝐄𝐒, and it was perfect for me. And so it was somewhat ironic that they hired me to make these admissions decisions, but I also think it showed that I care about helping students find the best place for them.
So should everyone watching this video apply to Dartmouth?
No, I think find the school for you, apply there, and enjoy.
Thank you so much. That's the end of the interview.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.